So then we are back with the modern understandings from the time of the Second Tabernacle services. We find in the Aramaic English translation of the word. This translation comes from the original manuscripts of the prophets of the Tzayelic lineage. So then we can understand the time of the end as per Yirmiyahu the prophet. We find in the layer of understanding of the 61st chapter, where then the prophet mentioned the spring feast, autumn feast, and also the returning of the cities of the Messiah laid waste for many centuries. So then, during this time where we are, during the time of the restoration period, after 09, we've entered the time of the restoration of the holy cities of the Messiah, and also the restoration of the Gentile areas, where then we find precisely then regarding Yirmiyahu the 61st chapter, even the heathen would participate during the time of the restoration period. So then, as we find nations trying themselves yet to push their way, as then the king of Babylon did. When you read it in the 3rd chapter of Daniel, you find obviously the king trying to come up with its own ideas, because what he was thinking was not thoughts of a person, but it was evil thoughts. And then when such situations they take place, demons, they are always related with it, never a person. So then this brings us to a very important fact regarding then the desire of the king, while he was not involved himself in understanding the truth, but he wanted his kingdom to last forever. 3rd chapter of Daniel then explained very plainly, he built then a statue of gold, and he made the people worship his statue of gold, thinking he could change the times and the seasons. It didn't work. Daniel then very wisely, he mentioned then the dream, where then when the king of Babylon asked his people and his diviners of their own kind, their own liking, they couldn't give the king answers then regarding what went on. So then during this time, then the king was very stern and said, if these people working for the crown at the time, if they would not reveal what was the dream, neither its interpretation, then they would be destroyed. So then they start, became very panicky, and then they reply and say, what you are asking, no person on this earth can give you. No spirit living with the humans know what you are talking about. And he ordered then Ashpenaz then to go around and destroy them. And then when Daniel heard it, he asked for some time, and he then consulted with the Creator, and the Creator revealed, and then he was able to save those scoundrels, because that's what those people were. Those were diviners, but they were scoundrels at the same time, because later they tried to plot against Daniel and they were eaten by lions. So then during this time where nations, they are trying to come together in their own worship of their own hands, because Yirmiyahu the prophet has stated very precisely, the cities returning, and then the Gentiles included. The Gentiles are included in the plan as long as they are obedient and they come out of their own evils. This is what we are facing. Nations, they are refusing to come out of their own evils. You know why? Because they were born during the time of deceit. They were having parents from the time of deceit, grandparents from the time of deceit, great-grandparents from the time of deceit. And more than 1,000 years of deceit, if we make the calculations properly, it's a bit over 1,000. So then, they don't recognize that they are involved with lineage, generation upon generation of more than 1,000 years of deceit, and they think they are doing the work properly as their own thinking. But when they understand then tabernacling, they begin to falter. Because the Creator has said very precisely, through then Daniel, through then Yirmiyahu, regarding then the cities of the Messiah returning, and as a bonus, try to understand, as a bonus, the Creator then extended His holy influence even to the Gentiles, the scoundrels, set then to die because they have absolutely no part with the instruction. And then He then, being very nice, decided then to include the Gentiles. But then the Gentiles, rather than coming to themselves and understanding that they should humble themselves before the mighty hand of the Creator and acknowledge His holy plan, then they try to come against Him, and then they try to build their own statue of gold. So the world's market today, we find in the West and the other nations trying to come up with their own system. As during the time of the 1,000 years of deceit, then came the New World Order. New World Order no longer makes any sense. Because after 09, the time of deceit no longer exists. So then, after 09, nations should be concerned on what they should not do. And thus far, they are trying to do precisely what they did during the time of the 1,000 years of deceit, and it's not going to work. Won't work for the United States, won't work for Brazil, won't work in any other country. Australia, New Zealand, or then Germany, Poland, France. In any country, it won't work. The only pushing forward of the designers is then the kingdom of the East, China, North Soviet Union, and then South Africa. These are the designers, and those, yet they must be in line with the flow of events from the instructions. So then, last night came a report regarding then the situation of the world's market related with China. The problem is, since we do not have a dual monetary system, meaning virtual and then centralized banking combined, but we have only centralized bank and absolutely bankrupt, then we are trying to get the numbers from China from only half of the understanding. As very wisely, they have the virtual yuan, their same money system, then they have virtual and they have via central bank. These reports that we are receiving regarding China and their crisis and such, because China is having problems with then production, and then the crisis of the Chinese doesn't exist. We are receiving only half of the reports, only those reports available via the central bank, where then the monetary systems are then combined and synchronized via centralized banking. China has also virtual. That's why they have then direct trade, where then they do not have the ability of finding out how much China is then making. Only we receive half of it. So then this story of then China having crisis and such is absolutely not true. We find China absolutely growing by leaps and bounds, and not only this, but they are securing for themselves, furthering their resources and then raw materials. Because then in September, when the BRICS they join, and then they join with other countries are not joining those designers to make plans. No, they are going to be in line with a plan already given. Not even those big designers can change the instructions. They do what they should do within the line and then the parameters established on the holy instructions more than 2,500 years ago. Now let me ask you this. Countries that were then from 1,000 years of deceit, then without having enough experience, do they think they can change the holy instructions only because they have the desire of making their ways to work? It won't work. It won't work because they lack first they lack humility, and they lack a sense of understanding of the true instructions. They were born from a period where the holy cities were never found. So they have no understanding of the directives of the holy cities. So when they read Hebrews, some of these scoundrels from the government, not even the instructions they know how to read. At some point in Hebrews, then you find then Yohanan mentioning regarding the cities and the returning of the city and the returning of to the great city. Sometimes when the people read Yohanan speaking, he's talking about then the city yet coming in the future. But then these people returning to the city, they wished to return the city. He is explaining then when the new government is set up in the earth. So there were holy cities prior of 1009. The problem is governments of this world didn't want to admit they were born from a time where they are absolutely ignorant. So then we find the same scoundrels either in Brazil or any other place. The same scoundrels from the government, they are trying to do their own junk. It won't work. We are during the time of the restoration period of the holy cities, and the Gentiles, they were included as a bonus. They don't deserve it. But then the Creator, because He's nice, He knew the world is going to be absolutely, miserably in economical crisis, because always when nations, they do not have the guidance from the holy cities, always turns out chaos. And the world is in chaos. And the same scoundrels, they are trying to come against China. So comes then the fight of Baal and dragon, precisely as Daniel has mentioned. Daniel 11, you find then the time of the restoration period, a couple of chapters later in the Apocrypha. Then you find Baal and the dragon. It is the spiritual understanding of this world during the time of the dragon, establishing himself. But then you find the Babylonian system, the system of confusion, the system of nations trying to come together. They try to adhere to each other, but they would not, yet they are trying to do it. It won't work. The United States must retrieve and rebuild. That's the only objective. Other nations should also retrieve and rebuild. China is the leading nation at the moment as far as manufacturing. They are providing materials with a reasonable price, so then other nations can rebuild. There is no deal with the United States and China. There is no deal with Germany and China. There is no deal with Poland and China or France and China. Not in the level of designing. They can link up themselves then with the system of the dragon. Obviously, this is the whole purpose. But not as designers. There is no designing factor of the United States or any other country involving with China. China designs production. It's exclusive. There is no mixing. The Soviet Union is responsible for the security. Africa is responsible mostly for raw materials, and because they have the influence of the first holy city on the land of Kush, northern Sudan. That's where the first holy city of the restoration period is at. Then obviously the other 7 cities of Asia Minor, as the Messiah has spoken, must be then refurbished, precisely as per the instructions. Because the Messiah is going to use those 7 cities as then, in quote, then the anchoring places from where vengeance is coming. So then at the moment we know for sure 8 cities for sure. You find the restoration city, land of Cush, and then the 7 cities of Asia Minor as described precisely by Yohanan when he was in the first holy city. So then let's make sure then when China is involved with the trade of the end, making deals with nations, no other nation must mix with them regarding designing. There is no partnership design-wise speaking. China leads. The rest must be in line. And then retrieve and rebuild and becoming worthy partners so that in the future, when the Dragon then is online and becomes available for every computer, then they can do trade. America simply must retrieve and rebuild. There is no more space for America in the world other than retrieving and rebuilding. We were granted of the last couple hundred years of the time of the seat. We were given a chance of directives, and mostly we did a great job. 800 years was given to the United Kingdom. They did what they could. At the moment, then America must retrieve and acknowledge what the Creator has done. There is a specific schedule, and the schedule is on the 11th chapter of Daniel. If we don't retrieve and rebuild, we are going to get ourselves in trouble. Because the condition for the dragon to do his work during the time of the restoration period, as far as Gentiles, is when the dragon has exclusivity. And nations, they are trying to incorporate their deceit in the midst of the dragon. It won't work. It simply won't work. So then let's understand what Daniel said, and then the Apocrypha, the rest of the writings of Daniel. The Apocrypha is a spiritual understanding. It is the fight in the spirit of the Babylonian section of this world and the dragon himself. The dragon must be established. The Babylonian system not. So then, regarding this time, we find that then in September comes then the great visit of the G20 in the Soviet Union. What can they expect during this time? Is then the initiation of the Dragon's computerized system, meaning the banking system of the BRICS. The banking system of the BRICS is then the direct trade that must be used in the future. Must be established, it must be available. China has already uploaded. They have in their computers already. But BRICS is then the combining of other nations as per instructions, led by the dragon. If other nations, they are trying to come up with their own deceits, and they get themselves involved, then we ended up with stupid reports stating that China then economy is going down, where they only have half of the truth. They only have reports from sources only with a centralized banking system. They don't have the virtual understanding of it yet. And when they combine them both, they find the numbers very promising, obviously. Because China is responsible for then the trade of the end and the initiation of the dragon's system. The dragon must be established worldwide. Revelation, the 20th chapter, explains then the time of the seat devil. We are no longer during the time of devil and mockery. We are during the time of the dragon. Dragon means precision. And whatsoever system then each country is finding itself must be precise, precision. So then later they become worthy partners. United Kingdom was granted then 800 years of this 1,000. We were granted roughly a couple hundred years. We must retrieve and do what the Creator then is stating on His Word. He said very precisely, the kingdom of the East, China is the dragon, kingdom of the North is Soviet Union. Then security, meaning those nations doing direct trade with China, decentralized trade system. They are protected by the Soviet Union. And then the South, they have tabernacling there plus raw materials. It must function as per instructions, or then it's not going to work. But then the instructions are going to work. What is not going to work is the mixing of other people thinking that they can become part of the designing of it. No. United States is not part of the designing. They must retrieve and rebuild. This country must retrieve and rebuild. Our military forces must come out of the wars and come home and rebuild. After 2009, America should have returned and rebuilt. But then, the government is not aware of it yet. But they will. Can be sure of it. With unification of China and the Soviet Union, we will to retrieve and rebuild as per the instructions. The Messiah said not a layer of understanding of the instructions is going to be left undone. And the instructions are then valid for this country, or Soviet Union, or China, or Africa, or Brazil, or then Australia, or New Zealand, or any other place. And the Creator never has made a mistake. And He won't in the future. Or ends up being countries involved with the Vatican, and then the Pope going around asking for money. 26 times 6 digits of pounds than the Pope was asking Brazil to provide. What a scoundrel! What can he think he is that can go around and then visiting with governments of the world and is absolutely against the Constitution? No religious organization have the right of asking for money. Scoundrel of the worst kind. Child molestations and then sexual perversity, and then he comes around and asks for money. It shows that 1,000 years of deceit has ended. They can't do this anymore. Governments are becoming computerized. Then the earnings, when they get linked up with a dragon, those earnings are computed. Because it is a direct trade or decentralized trade. Whatsoever comes to the country, it is then recorded. Thus the time of precision, the time of the dragon, is a natural fact of the dragon. Precision. That's why then Shaliach Shaul said at the end they would believe fables. Fables, crazy people with their own instructions. They would come up with their own itching ears of what they want to hear rather than the true understanding of the instructions. They would come up with their own type of savior, their own type of teachers. And sure enough, there is, they have the false Messiah, they have a false religion, and a leader then asking for money where then is against the Constitution. Absolutely incredible. This gives further validity to the original instructions. So people should really be acquainted with it. Please stay tuned. Much more